Two issues that are affected by Part 2. The first one is around the abatement of holiday pay. And we heard some very interesting comments from the Minister yesterday, and also in previous questions he said that workers who receive their holiday pay when they're on ACC are double dipping. Now, this is one of the most miserly provisions in this bill. It is disgraceful, because what we're talking about here, Mr Chair, is pre-injury earnings. So we're talking about workers who've been working happily in their jobs, not going to work deliberately to be injured, as the Minister has suggested in past comments, but happily in their jobs, who are accruing holiday pay and who are, in some cases, haven't been able to take their holidays, maybe saving them up, maybe thinking about a holiday with their family, and then they're injured. Through no fault of their own. They're injured in the job, and what happens is they go on earnings-related compensation. Now, the next thing that happens to those workers is that they're fired because it's a frustration of contract, or for some other reason their job gets made redundant. And suddenly, because they have lost their jobs, they have to use their accrued holiday pay. The earnings-related compensation stops, and they have to use their holiday pay before it resumes. Now, I just think that is so mean. If you're lucky enough to have taken your holidays, used your holidays before you were injured, this doesn't apply to you. You carry on getting earnings-related compensation. So how mean is this? This is such a mean and miserly provision. And in fact, the Cabinet paper recommending these and other changes says that the estimated savings of this provision is $1 million. Now, in the scope of the scheme, that is tiny. That's a tiny amount of money. It's savings, yes, it's savings, but it's going to be paid for by the injured workers themselves. And the Treasury actually warned that the relatively small savings didn't seem to justify the unfairness of this provision. They said that claimants may think it's unfair to have weekly compensation abated because of annual leave accrued while they were earning or accrued in the previous financial year but was not paid till their termination of employment. So, as I said, if a worker in their job prior to injury has taken their holidays, then they're injured, they get earnings-related compensation. But if they haven't taken it because they're too busy or hard-working, or they haven't been able to agree on when they'll have their holidays with their employer, then it's just tough. They have to give up their holiday pay, their own money, their very own money that they earned as holiday pay, and have their earnings-related compensation suspended. Now, we did spend quite a lot of time on this in the Select Committee, Mr Chair. It was very interesting trying to get clarification, because the member opposite, Michael Woodhouse, was insisting that when workers are on ACC, they actually accrue holiday pay. Now, we all agree in the end, I think, that they accrue leave, and if they go back to work, they actually get that leave. But I'm here to tell the member, actually, I've gone back and talked to all the unions about this, and there's a whole lot of wage claims coming to employers based on Michael Woodhouse's insistence that workers who've been on ACC should be accruing holiday pay. I've gone and told them, Michael Woodhouse, thank you, Michael Woodhouse, there's a whole lot of pay claims coming your way, and then thank you, Michael Woodhouse and the National Party. Well, he won't admit it. That's the problem. He will never admit it. And right to the last minute in the Select Committee, he was insisting that he was right. So, thank you, Michael Woodhouse. I've given the advice to the unions. They're taking it seriously. They're saying, well, Michael Woodhouse thinks he knows what he's talking about, so we're off to do a whole lot of pay claims for all those workers on ACC who didn't get their holiday pay accrued. Now then, Mr Speaker, the other issue I want to talk to this morning is the proposal to reduce the weekly compensation for seasonal and part-time workers. Now, this is another miserable provision because it particularly affects workers who are women, who are Māori, who are Pacifica, who are in low-paid jobs, and we're talking about around about 500,000 of them. And these are workers that work in meatworks and fish processing and a whole range of seasonal jobs. And what this provision will do will change the calculation of their pay back to the pre-2008 calculation, and what it means is that they are going to end up much, much worse off should they be injured in their jobs. And so, Mr Chair, Mr Chair?
I call Darian Fenton.
Thank you. Now, Mr Chair, I think, as I said, this will significantly affect low-income workers, and it also exposes those workers to manifestly unjust compensation. They will end up not just on minimum wage for earnings-related compensation, they will end up, in some cases, on a heck of a lot more, less than that. It's very, very unfair. I want to give an example of the negative impact of this change. A young mother who's been financially dependent on her partner for most of the year undertakes seasonal work for 20 hours per week and gets severely injured during the 5th week on the job. Her $450 per week earnings for the 4 weeks prior to her injury is divided by 4 weeks initially. This is under Clause 36, Schedule 1.1, and she can receive 80% of this, or $360 for only 4 weeks after the first week of incapacity due to the injury. Then for the rest of the time that she is off, she's incapacitated, her weekly compensation is calculated by dividing the total amount of her income over her brief employment. $1,800 divided by 52 weeks is $27.70 a week. That is the compensation for that worker. How on earth is that woman supposed to help her family survive on that? It's a long way from real compensation, which, remember, is one of the principles, one of the Waterhouse principles that the National Party says that they support. It's a long way from real compensation for her severe work injury, and it's an unacceptable erosion of the social contract that underpins the scheme. Now, furthermore, the process by which that worker is categorised as non-permanent is to a large degree very arbitrary. It requires ACC to essentially make a guess whether or not the employee would have continued working for another 12 months. Now, there's no way of knowing this. There is no way of knowing. It assumes that seasonal workers go to work and for 3 months. It doesn't take into account that many seasonal workers actually work from one job to another. It just assumes that they're working for 3 months and that's the end of it. And so it should go without saying, Mr Chair, that in many cases it will not be able to be foretold by ACC whether that worker was going to continue working after their seasonal job ended. And so given the severe nature of the possible consequences of being a non-permanent employee under this bill, this is a test fraught with uncertainty, and it's simply unacceptable. So for these reasons, we believe that this proposed amendment is absolutely unfair and should not proceed. The other whack that will happen for a seasonal worker, they get a double whammy actually. They lose their job. They go on injured-related compensation. Because they're a seasonal worker, they'll get paid out their holiday pay.
That's right.
They'll get paid out their holiday pay. So then they're going to have to use their holiday pay. They're not on holiday, they're injured. But then they're going to have to use their holiday pay. Their payment's going to stop. Their $27.70 that this woman might be entitled will stop, and she will have to use the holiday pay that she's accrued in her job, in her seasonal job. Now that is incredibly unfair. Now, what's been interesting about this, Michael Woodhouse said that was all right too. Yes, and so did the Minister actually. He keeps saying that workers who are injured should not be better off when they're on earnings-related compensation. Well, I think I've demonstrated this morning, Mr Chair, that workers under this provision will be significantly worse off. $27.70 for that woman, $27.70 a week. That is totally unfair, totally unreasonable. And I just don't accept the Minister's assertion that somehow these workers are in it they're gaming it, because that's been the implication from the Minister's comments. They're gaming the system and they're better off under the provisions that Labor brought in 2008. We brought those provisions in 2008 for casual and seasonal workers for the very reasons that I have described, because what was happening before was unfair. And again, I say, we are talking about the most vulnerable workers in our country, round about 500,000 of them, doing very important work, getting paid minimum wage, struggling along, trying to feed their family, trying to do the best they can, and hopefully trying to find another job in between. One group of workers that was brought to our attention in the Select Committee are school support staff. Now, we know from the Fair Pay campaign that we saw late last year that these are very low-paid workers. They are affected by this provision. Mr. Chair.
I call Lynn Pillay.